He is known for being considered the father of anarchism and the founder of mutualist philosophy. He is recognized for declaring himself an anarchist and being one of anarchism's most influential theorists. His name is Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. In the bustling city of Besançon, France, a printer named Pierre-Joseph Proudhon immersed himself in the world of books and ideas. With an insatiable thirst for knowledge, he taught himself Latin to better print books in the language. Little did he know that this self-taught skill would pave the way for his groundbreaking philosophy. Proudhon's thoughts on the nature of property shook the foundations of society. In his seminal work, What is Property? Or, An Inquiry into the Principle of Right in Government, published in 1840, he boldly proclaimed, "Property is theft." This provocative statement caught the attention of both the French authorities and a young Karl Marx, sparking a correspondence between the two influential thinkers. As Proudhon's ideas gained traction, he found himself in the French Parliament after the Revolution of 1848. Embracing his role as a federalist, he sought to synthesize community and property, envisioning a society where individual worker and peasant possession prevailed over private ownership. Proudhon's vision of a peaceful social revolution centered around workers' councils, associations, and cooperatives, where the means of production were controlled by the people themselves. However, as with many revolutionary ideas, Proudhon faced opposition. Marx, once his friend and correspondent, fiercely criticized his philosophy in The Poverty of Philosophy, leading to a rupture between the anarchist and Marxist factions. Yet, Proudhon's contributions to anarchism were profound and far-reaching, inspiring future luminaries such as Mikhail Bakunin, Peter Kropotkin, and Benjamin Tucker to further develop his ideas into individualist anarchism, collectivist anarchism, anarcho-communism, and anarcho-syndicalism. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, the printer-turned-philosopher, left an indelible mark on the history of anarchism. His belief that property is theft challenged the prevailing notions of ownership and power, paving the way for a more egalitarian and cooperative society. Though his ideas faced criticism and divergence, his legacy endures, reminding us that even the humblest of beginnings can spark revolutionary change. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, the father of anarchism, was a visionary thinker who pioneered the concept of anarchy and its application to society. He was the first to refer to himself as an anarchist, and his philosophy of mutualism sought to find a middle ground between individualist anarchism and social anarchism. Proudhon believed in a society without authority, where the government of man by man was rejected, and the exploitation of man by man was abolished. In his influential work, What is Property, published in 1840, Proudhon defined anarchy as the absence of a master or sovereign. He argued that just as individuals seek justice and equality, society seeks order in anarchy. Proudhon firmly believed that whoever attempted to govern him was a usurper and a tyrant, declaring them his enemy. He urged for a society without authority, where individuals could live free from the oppressive hand of rulers. Towards the end of his life, Proudhon modified some of his earlier views. In The Principle of Federation, he proposed a decentralized theory of federal government, emphasizing the balancing of authority by liberty. He redefined anarchy as the government of each by himself, where political functions were reduced to industrial functions, and social order arose from transactions and exchanges. Proudhon saw property as a counterweight to the state, recognizing its potential to protect citizens from capitalist and financial feudalism. However, some critics argue that Proudhon's later works took a conservative turn, straying away from his anarchist principles. Nevertheless, his contributions laid the foundation for anarchist thought and continue to inspire new ways of understanding governance, authority, and social order. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, a renowned philosopher, embarked on a journey to find a new social order, one that would go beyond the extremes of communism and private property. In his seminal work, What is Property?, he sought to synthesize these conflicting ideologies into a third form of society, which he called liberty. Proudhon believed that true freedom could only be achieved by reconciling the principles of communism and property. Proudhon recognized that compulsory communism and privileged property had their flaws. He sought to find a balance, a middle ground that would address the shortcomings of both systems. He described this balance as mutuality, the synthesis of the notions of private property and collective ownership. It was through this synthesis that Proudhon believed liberty could be attained. However, Proudhon's journey was not without its challenges. The apparent contradiction between his theories of property presented an antithesis that still needed to be resolved. Despite this, he remained steadfast in his belief that his theory of property is liberty did not negate his earlier assertion that property is theft. Proudhon understood that these ideas were not mutually exclusive but rather different aspects of a complex societal structure. In his pursuit of a balanced society, Proudhon emphasized the importance of finding harmony between seemingly irreconcilable approaches, such as communism and property. He recognized that these ideologies could not be fully reconciled, but he believed that through careful consideration and a commitment to balance, a new social order could emerge. Proudhon's ideas resonated beyond his time. His approach to synthesizing conflicting ideologies influenced other thinkers, such as the American mutualist William Batchelder Greene. Greene also advocated for a balanced approach, seeking to find a middle ground between communism and property. The philosophy of Pierre-Joseph Proudhon continues to offer valuable insights today. In our daily lives, it reminds us of the importance of seeking harmony and balance, even in the face of seemingly irreconcilable differences. It urges us to transcend rigid ideologies and embrace a nuanced understanding of society, one that embraces both individual liberty and collective well-being. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, a prominent philosopher of his time, believed in empowering workers and creating a more just society through his philosophy of mutualism. Mutualism, for Proudhon, meant establishing free association and industrial democracy, where workplaces would be handed over to democratically organized workers' associations. He envisioned these associations as models for agriculture, industry, and trade, forming the foundation of a democratic social republic. In Proudhon's vision, workers would no longer sell their labor to capitalists but instead work for themselves in cooperatives. He urged workers to form democratic societies with equal conditions for all members, warning of the dangers of relapsing into feudalism if they failed to do so. His goal was to put an end to capitalistic and proprietary exploitation, abolish the wage system, and ensure equal and just exchange for all. Proudhon's philosophy of market socialism was deeply intertwined with his ideas of industrial democracy and workers' self-management. He consistently advocated for a system that would return control and direction of the economy to the workers themselves. He believed that strong workers' associations, through joint elections, could determine how enterprises should be operated on a day-to-day basis. Today, Proudhon's philosophy still holds relevance as we grapple with issues of inequality and exploitation in our society. His emphasis on empowering workers and creating democratic structures within the economy can help us navigate the challenges of our daily lives. By promoting cooperation and equal conditions, Proudhon's philosophy encourages us to strive for a more just and equitable society where everyone has a voice in shaping their own destinies. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, a prominent figure in the realms of anarchism and socialism, developed a philosophy known as mutualism. He believed in the control of the means of production by the workers and envisioned a society where self-employed artisans, peasants, and cooperatives would trade their products on the market. In his vision, factories and other large workplaces would be run by labor associations based on direct democracy, while the state would be abolished and replaced by a federation of free communes. Proudhon's philosophy was rooted in the idea of possession rather than ownership. He argued against entitlement to land and capital, highlighting the negative consequences they brought. He believed that the pursuit of profit led to social instability and cycles of debt that overwhelmed the capacity of labor to repay. Additionally, he saw the concentration of wealth and property as a breeding ground for despotism and the subjugation of workers. However, Proudhon recognized the importance of property as a counterweight to state power and a protector of individual liberty. He stated, "Property is the greatest revolutionary force which exists, with an unequaled capacity for setting itself against authority." He believed that private property should act as a check on the power of the state, guaranteeing the freedom of individuals. Nevertheless, he maintained his opposition to private property in land, asserting that the work put into it did not grant ownership rights. Proudhon advocated for a more equitable distribution of property and limited its size to what individuals, families, and worker associations actually used. He supported the right of inheritance, considering it a foundation of the family and society. However, he drew a distinction between personal possessions and the instruments of labor, asserting that the transmission of wealth should not apply to the latter. Proudhon's philosophy rejected both capitalism and state socialism, as he opposed profit, wage labor, worker exploitation, and authoritarian forms of communism. While he critiqued the institutions associated with property, he did not seek to abolish interest and rent through legislation. Instead, he advocated for voluntary and reciprocal exchanges, emphasizing the universalization of the principle of reciprocity. Proudhon's ideas continue to inspire discussions on alternative economic and political systems. His emphasis on worker control, decentralization, and the balance between property and individual liberty offers insights that can guide us in addressing the challenges we face in our daily lives. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, a prominent philosopher and advocate of mutualism, had a profound belief that the mission of the 19th century was to put an end to militarism. He argued that unless society addressed this issue, it would face an indefinite period of decadence. Proudhon firmly believed that it was the workers who held the power to eliminate war by creating economic equilibrium. However, achieving this required a radical revolution in ideas and morals. In his critique of war, Proudhon condemned it without reservation. He believed that war was obsolete and that its root cause lay in injustice. He asserted that conflict could only be eradicated when society reorganized itself along egalitarian lines. Proudhon's perspective on war was not just theoretical, he aimed to prove that the reign of political economy would be the reign of peace. It was perplexing for him to be accused of defending militarism when his intentions were quite the opposite. Mutualism, as envisioned by Proudhon, went beyond the boundaries of nationality and patriotism. He envisioned a world where these concepts would only refer to places of birth. Proudhon firmly believed that every individual, regardless of race or color, was an inhabitant of the universe, and citizenship should be an acquired right everywhere. He rejected dictatorship and embraced the ideals of republicanism, democracy, and socialism, seeing them as complementary to each other. Proudhon's critique of democracy was often misunderstood. He did not seek to destroy it but to complete the work of the French Revolution. His criticism was directed towards what he called the false democracy, a liberal, pseudo-democracy that lacked economic and social justice. He contrasted this with a young democracy, which was a social democracy that aimed to address the needs of the people. It is important to note that Proudhon's ideas sometimes appeared contradictory to his anarchist beliefs. For instance, he proposed that each citizen should perform 1 or 2 years of militia service. This proposition was part of his electoral manifesto, where he outlined his vision for a form of government that combined centralized administration with individual freedom and sovereignty. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, a prominent philosopher and anarchist of the 19th century, had a unique perspective on the concept of property. He believed that property, especially when held by the privileged few, was a form of government that relied on the backing of the state. Proudhon distinguished between personal property, which had direct use value to the individual, and private property, which he saw as a means of exploitation and control. In his famous work, What is Property?, Proudhon made several thought-provoking statements about property. He declared that property is theft, highlighting the belief that the profits derived from labor were stolen by landowners and capitalists. Proudhon emphasized the subordination and exploitation of workers under the capitalist system, stating that their permanent condition is one of obedience. However, Proudhon also recognized that property could be seen as impossible, despotism, or even freedom. He argued that illegitimate property was based on dominion and enforced through force, regardless of its form. Proudhon rejected entitlement and advocated for possession based on occupancy. He acknowledged different kinds of property, with naked property representing dominant and seigneurial power, and possession being a matter of fact rather than right. Proudhon believed that property, when rooted in labor, could be a source of freedom. He saw the product of one's labor as legitimate property, while anything beyond that was not. He advocated for workers' self-management and opposed private ownership of the means of production. Proudhon warned that a society based on private property would lead to despotism and the imposition of one's will as law. Proudhon's philosophy on property continues to provoke discussions and debates. His ideas challenge traditional notions of ownership and advocate for a more equitable distribution of resources. By questioning the legitimacy of property and promoting workers' rights, Proudhon's philosophy can inspire us to reflect on our own relationship with property and consider alternative ways of organizing society. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, a prominent figure in anarchist philosophy, had a unique perspective on the concept of private property and its relationship with the state. He believed that there was a distinction between legitimate ownership of goods, which he called possession, and the exploitative nature of property. Proudhon argued that property rights should be used as a means to control state power, rather than abolishing it entirely. In his later writings, Proudhon emphasized the antagonism between state power and property rights. He recognized that property, by its nature, could be autocratic and exploitative, summed up in a single word, exploitation. However, he also saw the potential for property to become a guarantee of liberty and a counterweight to the state. Proudhon believed that if property was spread more equally throughout society and firmly established, it could help maintain a balance of power and prevent exploitation and oppression. Despite his strong critique of exploitative property, Proudhon did not oppose property as a form of possession. He acknowledged the importance of individuals having control over their dwellings, land, and tools necessary for their livelihoods. In fact, he regarded possession as the cornerstone of liberty. His main criticism of communists was their desire to destroy this form of property. Proudhon's bold statements denouncing property were meant to emphasize the abuses associated with it. He aimed to condemn those who use property to exploit the labor of others without contributing any effort themselves. His focus was on the property that involved interest, rent, and the impositions of non-producers on producers. In conclusion, Proudhon's philosophy on private property and the state highlights the need for a more egalitarian and widespread distribution of property to maintain liberty and counterbalance state power. He believed that property, when divided equally throughout society, could prevent exploitation and ensure justice. While he criticized exploitative property, he recognized the importance of individuals having control over their possessions. This perspective offers insights into how we can navigate the complexities of property and its relationship with the state in our daily lives. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, known for his revolutionary ideas, had a different vision of revolution. For him, it wasn't about civil war or violent upheaval, but rather a transformation of society rooted in morality and ethics. Proudhon believed in the power of monetary reform and the organization of credit banks and workers' associations as levers for change. His philosophy can be seen as part of the liberal socialist tradition, advocating for egalitarianism and free markets, while seeking to limit the role of the state. During the 1848 French Revolution and the Second French Republic, Proudhon took a radical stance. He criticized the national workshops for being mere charity, highlighting the need for substantive change. At the same time, he also criticized the violence of the June Days Uprising. Proudhon believed that the revolution lacked a clear idea and criticized both moderate and radical elements of the movement. These contradictions in his thinking were a result of his dialectical phase and his exploration of irreducible contradictions in his work, The System of Economic Contradictions. One of Proudhon's significant contributions was the concept of dual power, which would later be developed by Vladimir Lenin. Proudhon suggested that mass democracy in the form of clubs could serve as a popular forum, preparing the social agenda of the revolution for use by the Constituent Assembly. This proposal aimed to defuse the potential rebelliousness of the clubs and establish a system where power was shared between the people and the state. Proudhon's philosophy of ethical socialism and his emphasis on the transformation of society through moral values and economic reform remain relevant today. His ideas prompt us to question the role of the state, advocate for equality, and seek new ways to organize society. By recognizing the potential contradictions in our own thinking and embracing a dialectical approach, we can navigate the complexities of social change in pursuit of a more just and equitable world.
Do you want to explore more philosophers? Who do you want to see featured next? Subscribe and leave a comment below to let me know. I'll see you in the next video.